This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
And welcome in, folks, to another edition of Open Mic Night. I am your host, Noah Lukey, and on today's episode, the Lions losing 38-35 over the Philadelphia Eagles in regular season game number 1, opening weekend. I'm going to break down the game and answer a couple of questions that I know have been surfacing out there throughout Metro Detroit this entire week about this football team. So hopefully everybody has had a great last couple of weeks. I know I've taken a little bit of a hiatus from the podcast the last week or so, and it's because I've been extremely busy on working on this football book for the 100th season of John Carroll football. As many of you know, I do the graduate assistant in the sports information department at John Carroll in Cleveland, small Jesuit school, with a huge NFL connection. We have 40 alums right now currently working in the NFL, 3 general managers, a head coach in Josh McDaniels, a couple of guys for the Eagles, actually, that are part of the John Carroll pipeline. I believe 3 of them came from John Carroll that are on the Eagles coaching staff right now. So, but it is our 100th football season, and for the last year and a half, I've been working on a book commemorating the 100th season. And it's been a lot of time and a lot of late nights, staying up till 4 or 5 a.m., doing this a lot. But I am proud to say it is done. At least the initial copies and the initial drafts are done. It's just about kind of proofreading and editing after this and trying to format everything correctly and whatnot. But at least there was an initial PDF printed as well. So really excited about that. Hopefully that'll be out pretty soon, and we're gonna send it out to a lot of our NFL alums as well. Really looking forward to that. Hopefully, one day we need to get an alum with the Lions. The last alum that we had with the Lions was Chuck Prefer. If anyone knows, the longtime special teams coach for your Lions from 1997 to 2006. He is a John Carroll graduate, class of 1963. His son, Mike, is actually with the Browns, a special teams coordinator. He was the acting head coach in the 2020 game against the Steelers when the Browns won their first playoff game since, whenever it was, the 90s, I think. So I think it was since Bill Belichick was there. So, yeah, that's his son. Mike Prefer. Yes, his father, Chuck, John Carroll grad, longtime resident of the Cleveland area as well. All right, so let's get into the topic that everybody in Metro Detroit wants to talk about, and that is the Lions' 38-35 loss over the Philadelphia Eagles on Sunday to open up the regular season. And, all right, public service announcement to begin. I did not actually watch the game. I actually listened to the game. I listened on 97.1 The Ticket with Dan Miller and Lomas Brown and TJ Lang. And I got to say, just first radio observations, it looks like they're going with a little bit more of a 3-man booth this year. Well, actually, I take that back. So TJ is really the sideline reporter, but he acts like the third man in the booth. I heard TJ a lot commenting a lot on plays and different players. A true sideline reporter is the one that's saying, okay, hey guys, let's send it. You only hear from him a couple times a game, but here you go. This is an injury that's happening, or this coach said this is what happened in this timeout. No, but TJ, he seems like he's commenting on plays just with Lomas Brown afterwards. So that's an interesting twist to the broadcast. Also, it's a we fest on there, and we, as I mean, they refer to the Lions a lot as we. And, for someone like me who's going to school for that broadcasting, has been broadcasting games for almost 10 years now, going back to U of D days. The number one thing that they tell you is not to say we during a broadcast. It's the Lions, the Eagles. You don't say we or they. It's always even if you're the home team, you always just say your name. I don't say on the broadcast, I don't say we for John Carroll. I always say John Carroll or Blue Streaks, Blue and Gold. So interesting that they're using we a lot in the broadcast. That's just a little thing that I noticed that, the little broadcaster in me, I guess, noticed. All right, so look, they went right down the field and scored on their opening possession. I mean, that was, I think that was kind of feeding off the energy of the crowd, because the crowd was really, really into it. I mean, the whole thing with standing room only tickets was really, really cool. Being able to, like I said, I just listened on the radio, but being able to, I heard it. I heard how loud Ford Field was, and they really showed up. They were really, really excited to see, the Lions with this, and this was the first time since 2019 that they had sold any sort of standing room only tickets. So really, really cool to see from the crowd. I know Dan Campbell acknowledged and all that, how great the crowd was all day. And they helped. I mean, they really helped the Lions, I think, because there were some times where the Eagles went off sides, because of the crowd noise. And so Ford Field really showed up on Sunday, which was a good sign, because last year, as we know, there was a lot of empty seats in Ford Field. So hoping to raise the attendance up this year at Lions games for sure. All right, so they went right down the field and scored, and they really, really set the tone early. Swift had that long 50-yard run, and then boom, right in. Jamal Williams, great start. But the problem all game really was the defense. They could not contain Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts with that run-pass option, the RPOs, that really destroyed the Lions. They could not contain him on the outside when running. His arm strength over the middle. They had a tough time defending Jalen Hurts. Now, luckily, the offense was able to keep him out in the game. I mean, rushing the ball, this team had 181 yards. They averaged 6.5 yards a carry, of course. DeAndre Swift with 144 of those 181 yards. Very impressive there. A new career high for the third-year running back out of Georgia. But, 181 yards on the ground. Remember, guys, remember when the Lions couldn't run the ball at all? Remember those days with Patricia? And remember, the Lions were even lucky if they had over 100 yards as a team every game. We're starting to see it a little bit more consistently now. Swift, that was his third 100-yard game of his career. Hopefully this will keep up, because the whole problem, all these years, you go back to Caldwell, you go back to Jim Schwartz, the Lions were not able to run the football. What is this team going to do? Their identity is the offensive line and running the football. They at least ran the football on Sunday, which makes me happy. Happy for the future. At least that's a good sign. Even with Vaitai being out, Vaitai did not play due to a back injury, and I believe Tommy Kramer got the start ahead of him, the lineman from Notre Dame. So even with a missing piece on the O-line, they were still able to produce on the ground, which was quite impressive. From the quarterback position, Jared Goff, a pedestrian, 21 of 37 for 215 yards, 2 touchdowns, but a crucial interception return for a touchdown, a pick six. I believe that was in the second quarter. Only sacked one time, though. I will give him that. Only sacked once. So the O-line doing its job in the pass game for sure. But, I keep telling people, I say, look, I just think Goff needs one chance. I think he just needs one more chance, kind of prove himself, to see if anything's left in the tank for him to be a reliable quarterback moving forward. Speaking of Goff, I wish they did a little bit off track, but I wish they did a little bit more of a feature on him for Hard Knocks. I know we didn't really get to talk about Hard Knocks the last couple weeks, but this would have been something compelling. Jared Goff in his seventh year in the league with a new team, or for the second year, after Pro Bowl form, leading the team to a Super Bowl, leading the Rams to the Super Bowl. Can he do it in Detroit? There's a whole thing. California kid his whole life. Now he's in Detroit. There's a whole story behind that. I didn't see any of that, unfortunately. But I keep telling people that they need to give Jared Goff a second chance. But I just didn't think he played that well on Sunday. I just think there's better options. There might be better options available. Now, look, I know it's just 1 week. We'll see how he does against Washington next week, but pedestrian. It just does not seem like the Lions have much, at least in the receiving end. I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown had the touchdown, 64 yards. DJ Chark had a touchdown, 52 yards on 4 catches. TJ, where was he? 4 catches, 38 yards. I mean, they have these weapons, right? They have St. Brown, Chark, TJ. Josh Reynolds had a nice 28-yard gain. But, they need a quarterback to deliver. And Jared Goff didn't really deliver. So, I think my initial thoughts of this team early on, they are going to be a run-first team. I mean, you saw how many yards they piled up on the ground. They gashed Philly's defense in the run game. This will be a run-first team, a ground-and-pound football team. And, maybe occasionally they'll rely on Jared Goff's arm, but it can't be consistently because this guy, I don't know how much he has left in him. We'll see at the rest of the year, but this first game, not impressed with Goff. Now, there's a lot of people out there that are saying, oh, well, look at how close this, another close loss, and Lions don't get any passes. Guys, all right, let's pump the brakes for a second. Am I going to sit here and tell you that, the Lions get another free pass, another moral victory, if you will? No, I'm not going to tell you that because the NFL is all about wins and losses, and it's all about can you get the job done or can't you? Because a lot, especially now with free agency and all that, a lot more coaches are on shorter leashes. You're not seeing coaches like the Don Shulas, the Tom Landrys, the Chuck Knowles of the early days, from 50, 60 years ago that are staying with the team for decades. You just don't see that anymore, building that culture. You only get a certain amount of years until ownership and company just says you're done. You haven't proven enough. And I get it. I get it's a wins and loss business. However, I really do think the Lions situation is a little different because this team was starting from square one. Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn had completely gutted this team from what Jim Caldwell had built it to, going to playoffs a couple times, to nothing. The worst it's been since the Matt Millen era. So this is year 2 of Dan Campbell. Now, there were some questionable coaching calls, especially like the first half where they should have maybe ran the clock out a little bit more. There's other things. However, this is week 1. I know the coaches are still getting used to the season a little bit, but I know that there were a lot of surprises in the NFL as well, like the Giants winning, Bears shocking the 49ers. That kind of came out of nowhere. Yeah, Giants beat the Titans, I believe. There was a lot of surprises, and a lot of people are like, well, why aren't the Lions part of that? They've never been a part of that. Now, I mean, they play tough. I mean, literally, like this Philadelphia team will probably end up making the playoffs. This is a playoff team, and the Lions hung with them the whole game. So I'm not saying this was a bad performance at all. I mean, defensively, there's obviously a lot of work. I mean, Aiden Hutchinson, where was he? One solo, I think he had one assisted tackle all game. Was he in Ann Arbor? Did he show up? Was he still with at Michigan? Wish I would have seen a little bit more from Hutchinson. But you got to remember too, he's a rookie. He's going to have those growing pains. Going to have to adjust to the NFL speed and whatnot and technique of these linemen. Don't call Aiden Hutchinson a bust. Please don't. This is one game. I can't stand that narrative. I can't stand when people say these guys are busts because they play bad in their first game. Don't say that about Aiden Hutchinson, please. Malcolm Rodriguez, apparently he flipped Jason Kelsey, the all-pro center, on his back. He knocked him over or something like that. So I know the Eagles really had high praise for Rodriguez. And, this is he's a guy that, really has worked hard, Rodrigo, to make this roster and really be a solid contributor. I mean, a 6th-round pick from Oklahoma State. He's already starting for the Lions. Does that speak to the lack of depth at linebacker? Probably. But however, this kid has earned the right to start. Don't think that the Lions have no talent at linebacker and blah, blah, blah. No, this kid has earned the right to start. And the fact that he's out there hitting people hard and whatnot, really, really good sign to see from Rodrigo, as he was aptly nicknamed in the Hard Knocks series. But look, there's a lot of positives to take away from this first game. This wasn't a blowout. Remember, 44-6 last year, the Eagles beat the Lions. Yeah, 44-6. This year, 38-35. You can already see some changes, obviously. My concern would be if they don't beat Washington. If this team starts out 0-2, then we have a little bit of a problem, I think. Because if it's another one of those close losses, then we got to start questioning a little bit of Dan Campbell, maybe a little bit. Start the questions, especially if it's an 0-2 start. Now, if they go out and beat Washington at home against another NFC East opponent, great. Nothing wrong with that. But I really think that this season, at least early on, will depend on how they respond against Washington. Now, Washington isn't, they're not some all-star laden team. I mean, good coach, Ron Rivera, quarterback Carson Wentz, of course, with a couple of nice receivers, Curtis Samuel and Terry McLaurin. Good defense as well, Chase Young. A couple of the D linemen are good, but actually that should be a good test. They talk about how games are won up in the trenches. How about an O-line for the Lions that they dub a top 10 O-line in the league versus an up-and-coming Washington front four with guys like Montez Sweat, Chase Young, and company? This game will be won in the trenches. If Washington can get to the quarterback, they can stop the Lions' run, they're going to win the game. If the Lions can push Washington around, run the football, establish momentum, I think the Lions will walk out of Ford Field with their first win of the season. I really do. It all starts up front, and I think the Lions. I think they're going to send a message this week. Jamal Williams, very vocal on Hard Knocks about the record from last season. It's obvious that the Lions are sick of this stuff. How will they respond, especially after a close loss? If they respond and they go kick Washington, they go blow them out, that's a really, really good sign. Really, really good sign if they do that. That'd be really impressive to see as well. Next couple games, so after Washington is at Vikings, another big test early on. Seahawks at home. Gosh, Geno Smith. How about Geno Smith going into Denver? Facing off against Russell Wilson, former team, of course, and beating him. How about that? Really, really nice to see from Geno Smith getting a second chance as a starter in the NFL. Then at Patriots, at New England before the bye week. So pretty much the next 5 games, two on the road. It's gonna say a lot about this football team, I think, this year, especially that Washington game. Like I said, trenches. This game will be won in the trenches. 4 touchdowns for Carson Wentz in the 28-22 victory over Jacksonville. They held Jacksonville on the ground, 123 yards on the ground. Nobody ran for over 100, but seems like Jacksonville was burning Washington in the passing game. 275 yards from Trevor Lawrence. Washington was gashing Jacksonville, 313 yards, 4 touchdowns for Carson Wentz. 2 to Jahan Dodson. 1 McLaurin, 1 to Curtis Samuel. So I know Jacksonville isn't really that, they're not supposed to be that good either. But 4 touchdowns from Carson Wentz. So definitely Lions will have to play some tight pass coverage. Now, speaking of pass coverage, how about Jeff Okudah? Getting his first game action since week 1 of last year because of his torn Achilles. He goes out there and allows 0 catches for 0 yards. How about that? Good to see from Jeff Okudah in his 3rd year in the NFL. People are already saying he's a bust. because he wasn't able to cover anyone. Can he develop? Can he mature? Can he learn from this injury that he had last year? Do all the right rehab, get back healthy, and be that third overall pick that the Lions drafted him to be back in 2020. This is a make it or break it year for Jeff Okudah. If he keeps doing that to receivers, he'll be on this team long term. But he went up against some decent receivers. I mean, you have AJ Brown, who had 155 yards, but when Jeff Okudah was matched up against him, he had 0 catches for 0 yards. Yeah, and then Goddard three catches for 60 yards. But that was it. I mean, just those two guys. Everyone else combined for less than 30. So Lions doing allowing those plays to AJ Brown, but kind of shutting everyone else down. But it'll be. I'm excited to see what happens. And one more thing too, the Lions did give up 216 yards on the ground. I mean, so their rushing defense definitely needs improvement. I mean, 2 guys almost ran for 100 yards. Miles Sanders 96, Jalen Hurts 90. I'm telling you that they could not stop that RPO, run pass option. So they're gonna have to work on that. We probably won't see that too much with Carson Wentz next Sunday, but it should be a good test up front. Now, the Lions, a couple of injuries that were happening. A couple guys sitting out of practice the last couple days. Taylor Decker was one of them. DeAndre Swift, Frank Ragnow, others. Jonah Jackson also sat out. I mean, even Tommy Kramer, the backup guard for Vaitai, who of course has the back injury, and Vaitai is still out. He might have to have he might be out for over a month with some back surgery. I don't think this is too much of a concern because it was Wednesday, but it is interesting how some of these guys are sitting out despite it being this early in the year, sitting out of practice. Even Swift he sat out of practice. Or was very limited at practice today because of an ankle injury. So I just really hope that the injury bug isn't going to hurt the Lions like it did last year. I mean, there's a lot of injuries, particularly on the offensive line last year. Let's just hope it doesn't repeat this year. We'll see who the Lions trot out on Sunday, but definitely look out for those injuries. The injury bug, hurt the Lions last year. Let's just hope that nothing serious is happening with this offensive line, because the Lions are going to need they're going to need this offensive line this year. So, this is how the line operates is how it's going to go. So, it'll be interesting to see who they trot out for week 2 against Washington. But if they start out 0-2 and we see some mistakes in close games, I mean, you think about it. If Jared Goff doesn't throw that pick 6, the Lions win the game. They win the game if he doesn't throw the pick 6. So, or just not, he doesn't even throw an interception on the drive. Lions win. They had a nice comeback. At the end, but it just wasn't enough. I'm willing to be patient. I know you fans out there have been waiting 60 years. I get it. But I just think each regime needs to be judged differently. We shouldn't judge each regime based on past behaviors. Like, I'm not judging Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell's regime for the mistakes that Patricia and Bob Quinn made. I'm not. But if the Lions keep making the same mistakes in close situations, that's something to be concerned with. They have to be able to close the door on these teams. We shall see. A win against Washington week 2 would really, really help, I think, in my opinion, turn this season around early on. Give them a new little attitude, a little identity. Closing out in the close games. Finishing. That's what all that, that blue-collar mentality, that's what that all is, finishing. That's what Dan Campbell's trying to establish. Go out and do it. Beat Washington. Close it out in the final minutes. That's what they need. That's what this team needs to do in order to win and be more of a contender in this NFC that looks pretty weak this year, honestly. Make sure to tune into all the other great podcast content on the podcast network. Michigan Podcast, they're full swing college football right now. J.J. McCarthy getting the start now for the Wolverines over Cade McNamara, who took Michigan to the playoff last year. That'll really shake things up. Harbaugh going with another quarterback there, a sophomore in McCarthy. And, of course, the Fan Report, always updating you on things Pistons related and NBA as well. Doc and Jock, always the original podcast, I guess, all things Lions related, and the wrestling podcast, of course, always doing their thing, WWE, AEW, all sorts of wrestling. And don't forget to check out John Macron's fantastic coverage that he's been doing with SI Lions. He's credentialed, able to get into all of the games, Lions games, so make sure to give a couple of his articles a read. Also, Matt Derry, our friend of the podcast, doing a great job with his Locked On Lions podcast. Definitely give that a listen for all things Detroit Lions related each and every day on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks again, folks, for tuning in, and make sure to tune in next week only on Open Mic Night.